Hello there, scholars. Welcome to the first lecture of Homestead 101. I'm your professor, Dr. Brown. Now, what we're going to talk about today is livestock. Specifically, we're going to talk about keeping chickens. Now, keeping chickens is going to be divided into two lectures. Lecture 1 is predominantly going to cover the whys of why people keep chickens, the basics of food, shelter, and water for baby chicks, what we feed baby chicks at what time. Now, lecture 2, is going to cover the juvenile stage and the adult stage. Is going to cover what we need to consider in terms of spacing. So you may need to wait for lecture 2 next week to determine if this is for you. And there'll be a little bit of homework for you at the end. All right, let's get started. What are the 3 main reasons why people would choose to keep chickens? Eggs, meat, and fertilizer for the garden. Did you know that when you compare chicken manure to cow manure, chicken manure is considered to be more concentrated? It is. Now, eggs. You've seen the price of eggs, right? Okay. How often do chickens lay eggs? People think once a day, once every 24 hours. They lay an egg about every 26 hours. Meat. Now, I don't keep my chickens for meat because I don't have it in me to slaughter chickens. I don't have it in me. So my reasons are eggs and fertilizer for the garden. All right. So if you are deciding to get chickens, how do we care for them when they're baby chicks? Food, shelter, and water. We start baby chickens off in a brooder area. This brooder area is going to make sure that they stay contained, that it's warm, that they aren't getting a draft, and that they have food and water at all times. What do we feed them? We feed them crumbles, just chicken crumbles actually. Just as we buy dog food or cat food or pig food, we buy chicken food. And the chicken food that we choose for baby chickens are a starter grower crumble for 2 reasons. The starter grower means that it has more protein to really help them grow and put some meat on their bones. So you want to use a starter grower that has 18% to 20% protein. And we choose crumbles because chickens don't have teeth. Whether they're baby chicks or adults, they don't have teeth. So they rely on having grit in their gizzard that grinds the food so that it can be absorbed. Just as we grind our food and chew with our teeth, they don't have teeth, so they need grit in their gizzards. Now, brand new baby chicks don't have any grit in their gizzards, so we have to feed them crumbles because it's very water soluble. Mixes with the water and it just dissolves so that their bodies can absorb it. They're just going to get the crumbles and the water for the first 2 weeks. Around 2 weeks, we're going to start sprinkling some chick grit onto their food, just as we would season our food with salt or pepper. Not do it liberally, right? Liberally, not too generous. But just as we would season our food with salt and pepper, we're going to sprinkle the grit on there. So as they're eating their crumbles, they're getting the grit into their gizzard. Now we start that around 2 weeks. Sometime around 3 weeks, we can start to introduce other things into their food. Their crumble into their diet. We'll introduce other things into their diet. Now, the crumbles will be their primary source of nutrition, but this gives them the opportunity to forage like they would in the wild, right? So the things I like to feed my baby chicks when they turn about 3 weeks old, I like to give them mealworms, and we'll talk about keeping mealworms in lecture 2. I also like to chop up some strawberries. I chop up a little bit of romaine lettuce, things like that, just to give them some balance in their diet. I also have in the past grown forage seed for my baby chicks. And of course, fresh water at all times. Now, let me show you what the brooder looks like, and we'll talk about the conditions for them. Now, this is my brooder area. Look at the little babies back there. This is their food, their crumbles. They make a complete mess. And this is their very shallow water dish. When I first get my chickens, I start them out in this very big, clear tote because it keeps their space confined so that most of the space in the brooder is taken up by the heater and just a small area is not covered by the heat. When baby chicks are in their first week of life, they need to be kept at 95 degrees. And then you decrease it 5 degrees each week. So during their first week, they're kept at 95. During their second week, they're kept at 90. During their third, they're kept at 85, and you get it. And you want to keep them in their brooder area until the temperatures outside are higher than the temperature at which they need to be kept. In my area, that will be until late April. While the daytime temperatures might warm up above the temperature they need to be kept, it drops down and gets very cold in the evening. So I tend to not put them out until late April. Isn't nice? Hi, little baby. Hi, baby. Now, I know their brooder area looks like a hot mess. And believe it or not, I changed those paper towels just a few hours ago. I change it every day. Now, you might be wondering, why is it paper towels? You want to keep them on paper towels or newspaper until you are absolutely sure that they can recognize their food from other things that might be on the bottom of the brooder. All right, so I told you we're going to have a little bit of homework. I want you to do a little bit of research. Specifically, I want you to look and see what the laws are in your area. Are you allowed to keep chickens where you live? If you are allowed to keep chickens, how many can you have? Is there a limitation on whether you can have hens and roosters, or can you have just hens? If you find out you can't have chickens and you want to move forward with this, your next piece of homework is to research what breed of chicken you think you might like to keep. I'm going to recommend 3 to you that I have kept and I've had success with these: Rhode Island Red, New Hampshire Red, and Americana. Now, Rhode Island Reds and New Hampshire Reds are very prolific egg layers. Rhode Island Reds will lay about 260 eggs a year, and your New Hampshire Reds will lay about 280 eggs a year. Now, the Americanas, beautiful gray birds, ranging from dark charcoal gray to a very pale gray, are your Easter egg layers. They lay eggs with beautiful shells of a light blue or a light green, but they lay fewer eggs a year, about 220 to 240 eggs a year. So you're probably wondering, if there's 365 days in the year, why are these chickens laying eggs 200 or so per year? Well, that's because of daylight hours. The longer the daylight hours, the more eggs they lay. So when you get into the winter time where the days are shorter, they don't lay eggs as frequently. I hope that this has been very informational for you. What can you expect from Lecture 2? Great question. Lecture 2, we're going to talk a little bit more about baby chicks because we're going to show you how we put that grit onto their food. And then we're going to talk about space in terms of keeping chickens. We're going to talk about coop sizes. We're going to talk about foraging for our birds. We're going to talk about chicken runs. That's going to be in our next lecture. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you next week. And by the way, if you have any questions, do not hesitate to put your questions in the comments. I'm here to help.